Everyone wants to take their business, their skills, to the next level. Small and mid-sized business owners have exceptional insight into how to do this. They endure and thrive because they find ways to overcome the challenges that come their way, and they can teach us valuable lessons to apply to our own companies and lives. Stephen Nooner, founder and owner of Alkali, a company with a unique process that helps businesses more effectively buy and manage their insurance programs. And Bob Gibbons, builder of Riata Commercial Realty, a real estate advisor and tenant advocate, are two prominent Metroplex businessmen who, along with their weekly guests, will ask their and your probing questions, finding impactful solutions that will help you reach for the next level. Here are your hosts, Stephen Nooner and Bob Gibbons.
Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. I'm your elusive but almost always present host, Stephen Nooner.
Elusive and almost always present. I feel so assured. Hey, this week we've got did I say I'm Bob Gibbons?
You're Bob Gibbons.
Okay, I think they know that from the intro. All right, so we have a good guest this week. We're excited for Jared Behnke being here with us. Jared is the founder and managing director of Transitus Capital.
There you go.
Boy, say that fast.
Yeah.
Spell it.
You can find out more about them at transituscap.com. That's transituscap.com.
You got it.
So we got to figure out what the heck that means. So Jared and Transitus they're middle market investment banking banking firm. They do M&A advisory, raising capital, and they deal with a lot of different sectors like energy, tech, industrial, healthcare, transportation, and we've got a whole lot of interesting stuff to talk about, but welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited about it.
So we like to start every show off with the wisdom of others, and we have a quote here that was provided by, I guess, your first boss.
My very first boss while I was doing an internship.
And it says, if you are having drinks with a client, always drink whiskey and not vodka, so the client knows you're drunk and not stupid.
That's right. Yeah. His thought was a client can forgive drunk. They've probably been there once or twice themselves. They're not so inclined to do business with someone who's just not that bright.
So,
but do you want to hire an alcoholic?
Well, yeah, I guess, ideally you don't have to check either box, but like I said, they'd rather know you're drunk than stupid.
So I'm going to give up. I'm looking good. I'm going to just put myself out as stupid in this category. So I read this quote, and I don't drink.
Okay, good.
So why is vodka dumb?
So, see, you
stupid?
can't, when someone's drinking vodka, there's not much smell to vodka, so you can't smell it.
Okay.
Now, with whiskey, you can smell it from a mile away. So if you're drinking, they can smell the whiskey, so they know you're drunk. If you're with vodka, they may just think you're dumb.
Okay, got it. Note to self.
You know, it's funny because my son, he's in business now, and he worked at a company a while back where they would go to happy hours, and he would never drink, but everybody else in his company, including the owner, would. And they're like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, I'm here to work. This is a business happy hour. Yes, it's a happy hour, but I'm here to work. I can't work if I'm drinking. So
Wow.
he didn't do it.
There you go.
So I thought
Respect
was
that.
There you go.
Amazing.
Mine is just I'd break out in hives and it'd be like, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
All right, Jared, one of the things that you told us that I thought was really interesting was that your two favorite hobbies are golfing and woodworking.
Yep.
So normally when one is a big-time woodworker, they start losing digits.
Yeah, I've been lucky.
You have all those. You need those for golf.
I took a fingertip off once, pretty good, with what's called a joiner, which is probably, in my opinion, the most dangerous tool I have in my shop. But I try to be careful. Golf is definitely my first love, but I have two sons, 5 and 7, and my wife, when they were younger, and still today, my wife told me I needed to find a hobby that didn't take me out of the house and leave her alone with the boys for 6-7 hours at a time. So woodworking it was. So I've built a lot of furniture. Just finished actually building a 2.5-story treehouse for my boys.
Wow.
Which is great because now our backyard is kind of grand central for our block with all the kids, which is a lot of fun.
photos.
So,
You're going to be on a TV show or something coming up?
And candidly, it turned out better than I expected, which is great. The kids love it. But yeah, then a lot of people immediately when they see it say, "Hey, have you seen that treehouse show?" And I have, and I'm nowhere near that league, but it's fun. They enjoy it.
When I was in high school, I did the wood shop, and then I worked in a wood carving shop.
There you go.
In San Francisco at one time. We carved these giant rocking horses for adults.
Yeah,
It was amazing. But anyway, way off topic.
Yeah, so let's talk about business. So Bob, introduced your company. I'm always kind of curious as to how people get into their business. I think
Sure.
it tells a lot of times what their company's like. So tell us that,
Yeah,
share that
no.
story.
I started my investment banking career like a lot of investment bankers, working for a big bank in New York, and but Texas is home, so I moved back about 6 years ago and worked for a small bank here in town for several years, and with the long-term goal that I wanted to start my own shop at some point. And so about 2.5 years ago, started Transitus Capital. And we work with small business owners and help them primarily either buy or sell businesses, as well as raise capital, often for those purposes, but for a variety of reasons. And it's something that I just genuinely enjoyed. And certainly the framework and the lessons learned working in a big bank in New York are invaluable experiences. But for me, having worked with very large corporations and now working with smaller, privately held, family-held businesses, I've just learned that it's something that I genuinely enjoy. I develop relationships with my clients. They become close friends.
Sure.
I just went out and played in a golf tournament with a client that we worked with about 1.5 years ago, just because we hadn't had a chance to spend time together in a while.
Cool.
And so that's what I genuinely enjoy. But we built Transitus, and the concept was that we're going to take a lot of those lessons and a lot of those processes and a lot of that sophistication that you could get from one of those big banks if you were a large corporation, and take a lot of that level of service and deliver it to the lower middle market,
Okay.
to the smaller business owners where they
So
can get that.
everyone defines lower middle market differently. So what does that mean to you guys?
Yeah, they do. For us, it's generally going to be businesses with $1 up to about $10 million in earnings
Okay.
in a given year. And
Revenue
so-
or net
earnings
profit?
and net
Okay.
profits. And when a business is in that size range, there's two things that are happening. First, they're a little bit smaller than a lot of other banks are necessarily willing to take on. It's a smaller transaction. For us, it's perfect. We feel like we add a lot of value where our clients can't get it, can't get that level of service, that level of expertise. And so we want to make sure that they're getting that level of service, that level of expertise, because at the end of the day, it results in a much better outcome for them.
Sure.
So what's the story behind the name?
Well, okay, so there's another private equity group, which is a company a group that buys companies, called Transition Capital Partners, and so that name was taken. But that was really what the thought was. Our clients, when they come to us, they're going through some sort of transition in their lives, personally, professionally, with their business. It's a big sea change for them, and so really that's what we're about, is helping kind of facilitate that process and making it something to be not necessarily scared about, but even excited about. So that transition is what they're going through. So hence the name Transitus, and so that's where the name
Is that
came
the
from.
Latin?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Really reaching. Well, unfortunately, I took Spanish in high school, so my Latin is really, really weak. So
So when you said start up shop, so what does it take to start a business like yours?
Yeah.
How does that differentiate? I mean, how do you differentiate yourself against other companies in your space?
Sure. Well, the normal blocking and tackling is not like starting almost any other business. In that you have to find office space,
Sure.
and do all those wonderful things. But for us, what really
None of
sets
them
us
generate any revenue.
Yeah, no, yeah. When I started the firm, I had lots of congratulations, and I told people, don't congratulate me yet. All I've done is figured out a way to spend more money, not less.
Right.
No, what differentiates us is that we find that we're in that little kind of almost no man's land, if you will, where there are a lot of really terrific banks that are we call upmarket, working on larger deals.
Sure.
And there are a lot of folks who are business brokers who are very, very good, and there's several even here in the DFW Metroplex that I think very, very highly of. But they work with much smaller businesses. And that space in that $1 to $10 million in earnings often doesn't get the level of service that it needs. And so what we're doing is we're taking that sophistication that comes from my experience working on Wall Street and really leveraging that on behalf of our clients in that space. And that includes all the folks in our firm are licensed, registered representatives, so
Okay.
they have to go through exams and go through background checks and do all of those things that sometimes that's not there. And so
Business brokers don't necessarily have to do that.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't have those requirements. So there's some legal hurdles that are involved in setting up shop, and as I said earlier, and so having those pieces in place, again, just we feel like it gives our clients an additional level of comfort.
Sure.
That they know when they're hiring us that they're getting someone that they can trust. I mean, their company is their baby.
Sure.
They've spent decades in some cases building it. And so putting that baby in the hands of strangers is not always, can be very uncomfortable. We try to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make that something that they can be very confident and, like I said earlier, even excited about.
How do you do that, though? I mean, that's
Yeah.
It's one thing to say that, but
It is.
how do you physically do that?
The answer is we start when we meet a client or a prospective client. We're not necessarily looking to be hired tomorrow. We want to develop a relationship with our prospective clients over even a number of years and be a good resource to them, answer questions for them, whether it be about what's going on in the marketplace or how they can begin to prepare their business for an eventual sale. Our experiences, what we're seeing, kind of the macro things that are going on, and there's obviously a lot of that happening these days, but just helping them understand just what they need to be thinking about well ahead, years ahead of a transaction, so that when they do get to that point in time where they're ready to, pull the trigger, it's an easy call. They know who they're going to call. They just pick up the phone. They call myself or my partner Victor, and it's a very easy, very organic process because it's someone that they've now known for years. And someone that they've developed that relationship and that level of trust over an extended period of time. That level of trust doesn't happen overnight. It can't. And so, having the opportunity to spend time with us and know that we're always going to be there for them and have given them good advice over an extended period of time helps a lot.
What would be the biggest challenge of your business?
Oh gosh, the biggest challenge for us is certainly finding the business owners that are interested in potentially hiring us, because the companies are privately held, family held businesses. There's no master list to go on to reach out to and say, oh, those are the 10 people I should call. So
Sure.
For us, it's just developing those relationships and identifying who those clients might be. And the next question obviously is, well, how do you do that? And the answer is, for us, we don't really do, this is as close as we come to marketing, if you will. All of our clients generally come to us through recommendations, relationships, referrals, which helps a lot for two reasons. They get comfortable with who we are because someone they trust has recommended us, but also whomever that person is that's introduced us knows what we do, the types of businesses that are appropriate for us where we can be helpful. And so there tends to be a certain amount of fit that's there from the very beginning.
What would you say is the biggest challenge when you're helping someone through the process? What is the biggest challenge for them?
Oh, it's the emotional side of it. Yeah, we're going to handle the financials and finding the buyers and doing all of those. There's tons of steps in the process, many of which are very the client's going to be not necessarily involved or almost unaware of in many cases. The biggest challenge for them is the emotional side of it. And listen, like I said, this is a business that they've poured their life into. They know it's the right thing, whatever that step may be, whether it's selling the company or buying something else or doing whatever that transition may be. They know it's the right thing to do, but knowing it and doing it are often two very different things. And it's an emotional, it's definitely an emotional moment for them. We had a client, we sold the business very recently, and we were literally getting on the final phone call to complete the sale. And he was running a few minutes behind, and somebody said, listen, he just needed to walk through the shop one more time.
Wow.
Before he got on the phone. And we all understood that. We appreciated it. The buyer appreciated it. They knew, listen, we're buying something that he's cared for, and we're excited to be part of that next chapter. But those are generally going to be the hardest things for our clients.
All right, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we want to talk about how do you prepare if you think you're going to sell in the next few years.
Sounds good.
Be back in a minute.
Stick around.
And now, Confessions of a Recovering Landlord.
This is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty, and I am your recovering landlord. After 20 years as a landlord, I now use that experience only for the benefit of companies that lease or buy office buildings and warehouses. Today's confession: knowledge is power. We all negotiate from a position of power and strength, or at least we want to. In any negotiation, the party with the most knowledge probably has the upper hand, and landlords count on this being the case whenever you're negotiating a lease, because most landlords are professional real estate investors and they hire professional leasing agents and property managers. Landlords are in the market every day negotiating leases, while tenants probably only negotiate one, maybe two leases every few years. So tenants feel outgunned. Don't let landlords have all the power. As a former landlord for 20 years, I understand how landlords think and what motivates them. So let me put that knowledge and experience to work on your side of the negotiation. To learn more, contact me at texastenantrep.com. Again, that's texastenantrep.com.
Have you started making plans to take your business to the next level in 2016? Hi, I'm Stephen Nooner, founder and CEO of Alkali. We have a trademark process called the Empowered Advantage that enables CEOs, business owners, and entrepreneurs to more effectively buy and manage their insurance. Before sitting down to make your plans for the new year, here are just a few things to consider. Would you say that you have an actual insurance strategy, one that you can articulate, or have you just purchased a policy here and there over the years? If you have an insurance strategy, was it discussed under the pressure of a renewal deadline or considered earlier in the year to avoid fire drill decision making? If your answer was no to either of these questions, then you may not have the right partner on your team. Visit alkaliservices.com to contact us and take the next step to a bigger and better future.
Hi, I'm Paul Spiegelman, and I'm the founder of the Small Giants community. I want to thank Bob for having me on, and I want to give Stephen a hard time for not showing up.
Welcome back, everyone, to the next level. We're here with our special guest, Jared Behnke, Managing Director of Transitus Capital. If you want to visit Transitus Capital, please visit their transituscap.com, TRANSITUS cap.com.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. I evidently didn't take Spanish or Latin.
I guess. All right. So before the break, I was teeing up the question of how do people prepare for this? If
Sure.
they think they're going to sell their business in the next 2 or 5, or I don't even know how long in advance they should prepare. So
Yeah.
help us out.
Gosh, the answer is they can prepare. There's really no time to be too early in preparing. The biggest things that we encounter when we're talking to prospective clients that are wanting to begin to prepare and get things in order, get their house in order, if you will, they're almost always focused on the financials. What am I doing for my financial reporting, whether it's monthly or quarterly or annual income statements, balance sheets? And generally speaking, the financials are going to be fine. Even if there's some disorder, that's where someone like ourselves, an investment bank, can be very helpful in organizing those. The things that take more time, and to be candid, are much harder to fix, if you will, are things like personnel. If you're going to sell your company, that means you're likely leaving. Who's going to sit in your seat? Mm-hmm. How deep is that management team behind you? How long have they been there? Who will step into that role? Is it somebody internally? Does a buyer need to think about bringing someone in from the outside? Also, what's going on in your business? Do you have is one particular part of your business done incredibly well, and now you have perhaps a big customer concentration where a very large percentage of your company is tied to one customer, but that's not necessarily been historically so. Will that change over time in the relatively near future organically, or is it something that you need to address, proactively? Those are the types of situations where we can get involved. Are there any legal or regulatory issues that you've never addressed and kind of are maybe the skeleton in the closet and nobody wants to talk about it, but perhaps now's the time to start talking about it? The biggest mistake our clients make, and prospective clients make, is ignoring that 800-pound gorilla in the corner and hoping nobody else will notice it either, when of course they will. And so, if there's anything that clients do, we have clients that I wish they didn't do, that maybe is a little bit of, sabotages the process sometimes, is they know there's an issue and they don't want anybody to know about it. And so they don't even tell me. And so we ask our clients very, very bluntly, be as honest as you can be. Let us know every bad thing about your company. We'll figure out the good things. Tell us the bad things first. And because we want to make sure, are these really that big a deal? Often they aren't necessarily a problem. In fact, some of them may be even, perhaps strengths or opportunities, because a buyer is buying a company. They want to have something to do with it that can take it to the next level. So you can say that's not really a problem. It's really an opportunity for the next owner. So those can be great things, but you do want to know what those things are, because, if I didn't file taxes for the last 5 years, that's something we need to fix. Those are things that, we need to address that before we start moving forward. But we can. They can be fixed. They can be addressed. They can be dealt with. You just have to be very, very honest about it.
What's the wildest thing you've seen people personal expense they've seen baked into their business?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I've certainly seen my share of boats and RVs and trips. I don't know that I've seen. We've seen some, let's just call it travel expenses that were a little unusual. Maybe had some individual line items that you didn't necessarily want to disclose. Sure. Some adult activities. So yeah, and that reminds me, we did have a client who actually had a line item for adult activities. They used a different term for it, but we kind of looked at it and said, "Is that what I think it is?" And in fact, it was.
Wow.
Well, at least they were very explicit about it.
Yeah.
It was very easy to spot. But yeah, you see some of those things, and those are certainly things that we would add back.
Sure.
That's also something, when we talked a little earlier about businesses and what size is appropriate for us. Often a business will be like, well, I don't necessarily make that much money, but it's because, a lot of my expenses for various things go through the company. And sure. We understand that. No one's in business to pay more in taxes than they necessarily need to.
Right.
So those are things that we can also help them understand how that works into the kind of the process, the calculations, the valuation. And often it's surprising. Certainly some business owners think their business is worth much more than it really is, but just as often there are business owners who are very surprised that their business is worth what it is. They often dramatically underestimate the value of their business.
Is there a ratio? I mean, more people tend to overvalue their business?
No, I think it's probably, I'd say if anything, they're almost never close. They're almost always very far off one way or the other,
okay. Wow.
Which is surprising, particularly if they're in a business that they've been in for decades even. They've probably seen some of their peers or competitors sold and likely heard stories about what that valuation was. I will say the stories they hear are also almost never true. If Joe on the golf course said he sold his business for X, it was probably X minus something.
Okay.
Business owners almost always overestimate what they sold their company for
right.
when telling that story.
Right.
But yeah, it's surprisingly, it's probably fairly evenly split between over and underestimating, but it's almost never even close to what it actually is.
Okay.
So we talked about in the intro that you guys help companies sell, but you also help them recapitalize.
We do, yeah.
So is there a difference in the way they prepare for either of those events, or are they very similar?
They're very similar in many respects. There's definitely a difference in what in the story. When they're selling the company, there's clearly a line in the sand where they're going to step aside and someone's going to take control. And so we talked a little bit about some of the personnel issues that go along with that. But they're both, quote unquote, I would call them both sell side processes, if you will. Because really you're selling and extolling the virtues of the business to whomever is providing, whether it's a buyer or somebody who's lending or investing into the business. So you're definitely still selling the business to a certain degree. But when you're recapitalizing, people want to know what you're going to do with that money. When you're selling the business, what are you going to do with that money? I don't know. I'm going to sit on the beach. But when you're raising capital and recapitalizing the business, what are you going to do with that money? How are you going to use it? Ideally, you're using it for growth. That makes an investor or a lender much happier. They don't want to just lend into a business that's going to be stagnant. It's hard to understand how that makes sense.
Spend it all on that line
that
you talked about.
Yeah, exactly. So I can put a boat on the company's balance sheet. Yeah. No, they want to know, what that growth story is. So they're typically in a recapitalization, there needs to be a pretty strong growth story or strategy, whether it's making acquisitions, whether it's investing in the business and buying new machinery or bringing in new personnel, or acquiring a competitor, whatever it may be. They're going to want to know what that story is.
And where do you typically go to get that money for a recapitalization? Is that from private equity? Is it from individuals, banks?
It's going to be typically from banks or private equity or family offices. Family offices often were referred to almost separately from private equity, and those aren't familiar. It's effectively just investors who are looking to invest in companies. Family offices have gotten much, much larger in the last 5 to 10 years. Dallas, Fort Worth is actually a pretty big hub for family offices, so they play a particularly large role in this market. But yeah, they're going to private equity and family office investors, as well as banks when you're borrowing, if you're borrowing capital, are the places that you're going to go most often.
So your business, right? What's let's talk about people. I saw, I know you were sharing an interesting story of some of the challenges you had.
Sure.
So how hard is it to get people in your space?
No, that's a very good question. Like any business, it's competitive. Good talent, finding good talent is a competitive process. I was very fortunate when we founded Transitus. I have one partner, Victor Blody, who had worked for me previously. So I was very lucky that I had somebody from day one that I trusted and had tremendous respect for, and had seen his work product. And
Sure.
So that helped. But as we grew, and fortunately we have grown and added members to our team, we grew faster than we anticipated. Always a good thing, but nonetheless has its own challenges. And so the biggest challenge we had was being patient and finding good talent. It's very easy to see someone who on paper looks relatively talented, and we think we can make them work. We learned some tough lessons. We had a couple folks that are no longer with us. And it was a fairly short process to kind of come to that conclusion, thankfully. But nonetheless, we realized, look, we're not going to be able to change someone for two reasons. It's hard to change someone to begin with, but candidly, we're growing very quickly, and my partner Victor and I are busy enough. It takes a lot of time that you have to invest in someone if you really want to affect a pretty substantial change. And so we learned very quickly we needed to find people that would join us that, to be honest, could hit the ground running and were a good fit from day one. And that requires some patience. It may mean that you're not going to hire somebody as quickly as you might like, and so that means you're doing the weight of the work of two sometimes. But that's okay. It's at the end of the day probably much more efficient than hiring the wrong person and going through some of those
sometimes
challenges.
you make the mistake of hiring the wrong person. Have you ever made the mistake of not hiring the right person?
Oh gosh, yes. There's one person, and I won't use his name, but there's one person that we had an opportunity to hire that would have been a terrific addition to our team, and I've told him so. And I wish we had hired him. He's moved on to another great opportunity, and we run into each other regularly. But yeah, absolutely. That's the other lesson we learned is when you see really good talent, and unfortunately it was early in our business, so it was hard for us to take that aggressive step to invest that early. We were still getting over some of those new business humps. But nonetheless, in hindsight, knowing what we know now, of course, hindsight's 2020, we would absolutely have hired him and done that, and I think it would have certainly made us a stronger firm. But those things happen.
What's next for you?
For us, next is continuing to do what we do. A lot of firms that start in our space have aspirations of growing and doing bigger and larger transactions. We love the space we're in. I mentioned it earlier. We become close friends with our clients. So really, we want to continue to just do more of the same. We don't want to do larger deals. We like the space we're in where we feel like we add a lot of value for our clients. They really need us. And that level of trust and almost codependence that we have with our clients is something that really is very, very rewarding at the end of the day. So for us, we don't want to move up market. We just want to do more of the same and help business owners as we have thus far, and just do more and more of that. It's really what we do well. Our clients are really happy with it, and at the end of the day, we're successful with it. So.
Well, thanks so much for being our guest today, Jared. We've
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it, learned a lot. If you'd like to learn more about Transitus Capital, please go to transituscap.com. If you'd like to know more about the show, go to nextlevelshow.com, and you can find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast at The Next Level Show. And you can look at our archives. And, we interviewed a guy named Dave Gorman who did sell his company several years ago and had to learn a new purpose in life after that. So go check that out. Be back next week.
Have a great week.
You have been listening to The Next Level, Conversations That Propel Business with Stephen Nooner and Bob Gibbons. Join us every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. for more prolific conversations that will take your business to the next level.